A joke, sorry.
It's a good joke.
Call your meeting to order.
I would like to call the Committee on Budget and Appropriations to order at 6 o'clock. I will be filling in for Ms. Hegney as she has a work commitment this evening and will not be able to join us. Tonight, we will be continuing with our budget hearings. We have police, library assessor, planning, and public works. Joined today by Director of Budget and Administration, Mr. Lacasse, and Chief Hegney of the Attleboro Police. So what we've been doing is just kind of talking, we're not going line by line as we have in the past, just talking about any kind of changes, anything that you think is prevalent that we should know. And before we get going, I just want to ask you how Coffee with a Cop went last night.
It was good.
Awesome.
It went well.
Terrific.
Yeah.
That's a great program. I think the outreach that you and your department do with the community is outstanding, so kudos on the initiative there.
I appreciate that.
We were here, or else we would have been there with you.
Oh,
I
thank
was
you.
there, but I went in the morning. I figured he was going to be there in the morning.
Did they have one at Dairy Carousel? 'Cause I was
So,
We're gonna have some more in the future. Hopefully, we can have one over the summer.
awesome.
Talking to Julie, and we were thinking about County Square. We haven't hit that Dunkin' Donuts yet, and so
I
then
think a
maybe.
weekend one would be good. If I didn't get back to you, I'm sorry, yes, I think a weekend one would be good.
Yeah, we haven't tried that yet. So we had them in the day.
Yep.
We're very successful. Last night, I think the weather was so well that no one wanted to drink hot coffee.
Understandable.
But it was good. Some citizens came out that we really engaged with and had some great discussions. So it's good
Good.
to hear the feedback, because as Sir Robert Peel said, since 1829, the police are the public and the public are the police.
Absolutely. So, great segue. So if you as the police want to tell the public what's going on?
Sure. I brought some documents, if you don't mind.
No,
Approach.
absolutely.
This will go hand in hand with your conversation.
Oh, terrific, thank you.
Just in case they come. I don't know if they'll come out there, I'll need them. I need that with Frank and the- Just want, before I get started and dive into this, the two gentlemen over my left shoulder, the two captains in the police department, as I like to call them, the two big toes. They really, you surround yourself with people, things fall into place, and I really surrounded myself with two great people. So Captain McDonald, Captain Brett Poyer. So they're fabulous, and they do a great job. So without them, I'd be lost on a daily basis. So I appreciate you guys and everything you do for the police department.
Thank you both for joining.
So, the police budget this year, the only difference between this year and last year is $27,000, which is amazing. Basically a level funded budget. And that is those increases include contractual agreements with step increases and what have you. So it's pretty remarkable that the only difference is $27,000. So we sharpened our pencil, but the sheet I handed out, I wanted to show you how we were able to save money. With the conversations that we've been having, Councilor Delicio, regarding the overtime budget versus straight salaries, and so with my discussions with the mayor on how to save money, I brought those forward to him, and he bought in and he agreed with it also. So what I'm speaking about is last year I requested $546,000 in overtime.
Yep.
So in this year, you'll see the difference of, I requested $335,000 in overtime. That's a $211,000 decrease, all right? Pretty significant. However, with that decrease, we figured out that if we were to hire 3 reserve officers, there would be a savings of $110,000. All right, so you take that $211,000. The cost of the 3 reserve officers is $100,000. So the 211 minus the 100,000, it gives you the 110. So it's $825,000, as you can see on your paper down below in that third column area. So by bringing on the 3 reserve officers at straight pay, which is $22.75 an hour, versus backfilling open positions, and the need for having the minimum manning on the street, the police officer average overtime rate is $47.34 an hour. So you can see on the graph to the right the difference. So when we have to maintain minimum manning at $47.34 an hour, you can see why we need so much overtime versus the straight time with the reserve officer. So $22.75 is a significant bargain versus the $47.34. So so that's where that savings comes from. And I tried to draw it out on the piece of paper because it's a little hard to explain. But when you see it on paper in a graph format too, it's a little easier to comprehend. So we were able to decrease significantly the overtime budget by hiring 3 reserve officers at $22.75 per hour versus the $47.34 if we had to backfill with the overtime. And that is just the average overtime. So there's officers in the department that actually have a higher overtime rate.
Sure.
So, any questions on that?
Well, first of all, I think, thank you for doing this. I mean, I know you and I have had conversations about this. You and Council Blair have had conversations about this. We've talked about overtime for as long as there's probably been police in the city. But I think to be able to go through, approach it with a systematic approach the way you have, and to have one of the biggest budgets in the city and only have an increase of $27,561.14, I think it speaks to the fact that you did more than just sharpen the pencil. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the transparency. Council Blair, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to ask Kyle, the reserve officers, how are you going to use those gentlemen?
The routine, regular patrol.
Regular patrol.
Yeah.
Very good.
So and if you remember last year, so we're down 3 officers. So we used to have 63 patrolmen. We're at 60 right now. These 3 would fill up to where we used to be. So by down those 3 officers, we had to backfill those 3 spots with overtime. So that's why you see the significant increase of 546 versus 335. So if we don't get those 3 officers, we're gonna have to come back and ask for overtime money. So there's a significant savings with the 3 versus the amounted budget for the overtime.
Sure.
So the 335 with those vacancies it's not gonna last us.
And of course, they're going to be coming in step 1.
If it's below step 1, it's a reserve officer rate.
Right, once they end up going from reserve,
Yeah,
ultimately that's the goal.
That's several years down the
Yeah,
road.
sure.
So they stay at reserve officers and they don't become permanent officers for several years later.
So it's a sustainable cost savings as well.
Yes, and then you have 7 steps to get all the way to the top.
Yep.
So,
Council Preca?
You started to answer the question. For those watching and at home, maybe you could just clarify the difference between a regular patrolman and a reserve officer?
so a reserve officer, for all intents and purposes, is the same thing as a permanent officer. They get the same exact training. They go to the same academy. They work the same hours. It's just a civil service designation.
How is it? How are they different though?
By a civil service.
By the seven,
Right.
just by okay.
Just simply by the civil service designation. So they go to the full-time academy. They get the same training. They're paid lower than the full-time officer. They perform the same duties, everything. It's just when officers retire from the police department at top step, we elevate these officers up. So the city appreciates the cost savings by doing it this way. We could bring everybody on and have them start right off the bat, go 1 through 7, but we're not going to capture those savings.
Sure.
So by doing this, we're actually saving money and putting money back into the general fund for other departments to capture and use elsewhere. So
That's what I was looking for. I was like the demographic of like the age range for, you know, the difference between, that's what I was looking for. So when, as your other officers age out or retire, these are cadets that are coming in.
they
And,
will elevate. Well, then it's
and I'm probably using the wrong terminology, so please excuse me.
so the way the civil service works is they're all civil service employees. So you have civil service reserve, permanent reserve officer, and then you have a civil service permanent. So, and many police departments do this around the state. They bring them in as reserves, right? When there's an opening, they elevate up the permanent officer, and that's when they start the course of their 1 through 7 steps. By doing that, though, there's no cost savings. So, and you can see with the overtime, that 4734 is just the average. So you, depending on the degrees the people have and everything else, that fluctuates. But 47 is the average in the entire department. So,
Thank you for the clarity on that. Thank you very much.
Council Blair, and then Council.
You know, Kyle, we've talked about the burnout with these, we've talked about burnout with your officers with the overtime too. So this should help with those guys that are working too many shifts.
oh, absolutely.
You know, I think that's important when we've talked about it. You know, there comes a point where they don't want the overtime, or it's not that they don't want it, they can't handle it. A person's only good for so many hours in a whack, so.
Yeah,
Will that help? Help that?
It will decrease the forced overtime, yes. Right, and we're coming up on the busy season now.
Yeah, well, I just think, you know,
Yes.
I've worked long hours before, and if you pull a double, or you have to stay over sometimes, it's,
Right.
you don't want to burn out a good officer.
Well, this council's been saying for years, why is overtime keep going up? Why is overtime keep going up? And the same thing with police and fire. And the statements have been made, why aren't we hiring at regular rate versus backfilling with overtime? And you can actually see the savings in front of you as to what the overtime rate, so I would, if we didn't hire these 3 reserve officers, I would be asking for $546,000 in overtime to get me through June 30th of next year.
Right.
So by doing it this way, we're actually saving $110,000 salaried overtime, I'm sorry. So,
Thank you.
Council Hall?
Yes, so these reserve officers, their expectation when they join the force would be eventually to move up into one of these permanent positions, is that correct?
right, but like right now, we have reserve officers working. The last, I would say, 35, 40 years, we've always had reserve officers. So we have reserve officers right now. When there's an opening,
Right.
when people retire, they get elevated up.
So what's your incentive to stay, well, I guess your incentive is that hopefully they'll get a job. But
Oh, no,
what
no,
is
no,
their
no, no.
incentive?
I say where you're going.
Thank you. Yeah.
We have it in our contract, right? We got this in 2 contracts ago, that you get hired by the city of Attleboro, you pay back your academy,
Okay,
right? It's in the contract,
why would they want to stay?
and it takes 3 to 4 years to pay back that academy.
Yeah.
Once the city gets those, I think it's about 4 years, it takes about, or 3.5, 4 years-ish. Once that person is there at that period and it pays back on, so we take money out of his weekly salary.
Yeah.
It goes into an account, and after that, like 3.5, 4 year period, he'll get that check back, but we get the service out of him.
Sure.
So we don't have a revolving door of people coming in, we send them to the academy on the taxpayer dollar, and all of a sudden they're going to a different police department.
Right.
That was a goal that the mayor and I had 2 contracts ago, and and the union agreed to it.
Well, it's smart. I mean, when you think about what it costs to onboard someone new and to get the most out of these officers, we're putting a lot into it, so it makes the most sense.
There's also another significant financial benefit for the officer too. I think you had 5 officers go from reserve to permanent in this budget.
Yes.
So they're averaging that's about a 16% increase from wherever they paid as a reserve officer to now as a permanent officer. That's another good incentive.
Sure.
Well, I think part of it, if I may, is if they're making sense to me, that we talked a lot about having people in the pipeline also that were qualified. And this would have people that are not only ready to go, that have already been to the academy, but having a little bit of experience out on the street, so when they do finally jump over, you're not getting somebody green either. And, we were, from what I understood before, one of the difficulties were not getting enough people to be able to get backfill when somebody retired, or when you had somebody go on military, or you had somebody that was ill or line of duty or something like that, and that was a big problem, keeping up with those people. So this seems like it would resolve that, some of that.
Yes, I mean, these reserve officers, for all intents and purposes, are regular police officers. We're paying them as a reserve officer, we're giving them the same training, and they're gonna be moved up as the need arises.
I think some of the confusion might be, and if you could take a second and differentiate auxiliary versus reserve, I think that.
All right, so an auxiliary is a citizen police officer. An auxiliary is a volunteer person, right, who goes to the part-time police academy, right, and donates his time working parades or special events and what have you. So that's the Attleboro Auxiliary Unit. That's a non-paid citizen. It used to be called civil defense.
Yep.
So that's their function. They do special events. They donate their time. They're very altruistic people. They're not paid, right? But they do not do technically police duties per se, right? They do traffic. They'll do special events such as the Lee Pond Festival.
Yep.
Or the La Salette Blessing of the Bikes, or the Memorial Day Parade, the fireworks. But they're not making arrests, they're not taking away people's liberty or what have you, right? They're citizen police officers, if you will, as an aid or a crutch to the police department when they have large events. The reserve officers, that they are trained at the full-time police academy. They have the same training hours, the same training curriculum, and they're working the same amount of hours. The only difference is civil service classifies them as a reserve permanent police officer. A reserve permanent reserve civil service status police officer.
Yep.
That's the only difference. It's on paper of a classification, if you will.
And they have power to arrest. They have
Yes.
power to take away people's
The
liberty.
military reserve and active duty,
Exactly. When they get activated, it's the same thing, right?
they have to.
That's a great example. It's the exact same thing. They get the same training, they get the same everything.
Excellent. Yeah, and I appreciate this, Chief. I appreciate you explaining the difference and really what the reserve officer is, how that's going to impact the budget, how that's going to impact your budget, because, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is my fourth budget session that I've sat through, and overtime is, one way or another, has been a main focus of what you've been hearing from us.
So even with these three reserve officers, $27,000 difference.
Yeah.
It would have been a lot more if we didn't, and we had to ask for the 546 and the overtime. So, but that's why I wanted to give you this paperwork so you could actually see it. So,
Appreciate
and it echoes on what the council has been saying for years regarding the overtime, with the police and fire.
Yep.
So,
Any other questions as it relates to the overtime? Okay. Chief, just a question I have. I noticed there was a slight increase. One of the few increases in your budget was ammunition.
yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that for a sec?
Yeah, if I could just finish the personnel section, move on.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
I just wanted to point out that the DARE overtime, and last year it was budgeted at $5,000. That's for the DARE officer. We do DARE in the 4 schools, 3 middle schools and St. John's. And it's, the $15,000 works out to be about $3,700 per school to teach DARE. So that's the difference there. I wanted to point that out.
I have to say, that is quite the impressive program. My son went through it this spring. Yeah, was it spring? Last fall. Last fall he went through it at Coelho, and he still talks about it. He still talks about the great job that Officer Today does, and really to have my 10-year-old come home and to be able to talk about some of the stuff that they talked about as a parent, I just want to say thank you, especially to Officer Today.
Thank you. It is, it's exceptional. We're going to keep it, and I've heard things like, oh, you know, we've had DARE years ago and it didn't work. Well, I don't think people realize that a fifth grader in this day and age is not the same as a fifth grader in 1985.
Right.
The knowledge a fifth grader has now versus back in 85, 87, 88 is vastly different, so I'm glad that the council and the mayor support that and keep that program alive, because I think it is making a difference in our kids' lives. So, the maintenance of contracts down in the service section, 524270. There was a slight increase in that account, and that was due to the fingerprint machine. When people get arrested, we fingerprint them. It's all electronic. That's a machine that's hooked up to the FBI's database and also the state police database. That machine was provided to us by the state, I want to say approximately 3 years ago. They picked up the tech support for 3 years. They no longer will support tech support on that machine, so now it's the burden of the city to maintain that tech support, and that's what that increase represents. The medical consultation, that's for the new recruits who attend academies. Obviously, we had recently some officers retire. Sturdy Hospital has gone up on their pricing for medical evaluations of the new recruits. Therefore, that reflects a change there. I believe it's $551 increase. The data processing service, that was an account that was actually cut last year. It's a little tenuous because we have a contract with Verizon on our air cards.
Yeah.
So to pay for those, and those air cards are what the officers have in their cruisers that are powered by their laptops, and they speak remotely to the desktops up at the CGIS, and that's when we run license plates for the RMV or wants and warrants out there on the street. That's the air cards that they link up with that wireless service that the state requires.
And that's contractual.
We have a contract with them, but it was cut last year, so it was really interesting to know how to. I mean, I even had trouble taking a PO out because I didn't have a full amount of the amount needed.
Yeah.
So I had to explain that. It's interesting to say the least. That's why. So that amount reflects what's required and what's needed in the contract with the Verizon for that service.
Required by contract.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was a little.
Harry.
It was tough. So nevertheless, moving on, the ammunition, right? The cost of ammunition is going up. I don't know how to put it elsewhere. Since the tragic events in Newtown, I blame it on capitalism, right? I think any chance they have to raise the cost of ammunition, it keeps going up. Now, the ammo we carry in our firearms on the street, that's duty ammo.
Yep.
That's significantly cheaper than the training ammo we carry. Frangible is what is required when we go to ranges. Frangible breaks up into 1,000 little pieces, and it's, technically, I guess you could say it's more green versus the I believe it's lead. The lead ammo that we discharge with our firearms for regular duty ammo. So the training ammo is extremely expensive versus the regular duty ammo. So, but we can't fire the regular duty ammo at the ranges because they will not let us, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So that represents that increase. The photographic supplies, that was not funded last year. However, with the change of the public records law, we're getting numerous requests for copies of CDs, of videos, and what have you, and also through the court with defense attorneys. So we requested $200 for that account. That was a zero account before, so that those CDs need to be purchased. So that's what that photographic supply account represents. And also there was, we subscribe to policeone.com training. We do roll call training on that. The best insurance in the world is training, and we show 15, 20-minute video clips at roll call for the officers, and it's a fabulous service. That increased $372 in that account. That represents that slight increase. So, and
I
that's-
actually had the opportunity to sit in on one of those with you, probably 8, 9 months ago. It's chilling what some of those videos are, and I think that, I think it's integral in today's day and age, and especially in policing the way it is today, so.
Yeah, it's a real benefit for the officers. Also, there's the internal tracking system, so if there was ever a lawsuit and they wanted to see who, how, where we train, that's one element of our training.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So each roll call, they're showing videos there, which is going to support the and defend the lawsuits that come against the city. And obviously, people do sue police. The uniform line, that's a contractual issue in the contract for police uniforms. And,
I have a question.
yes,
Is that, where's the motorcycle uniforms included, the ones that you just recently, is that included in that line, motorcycle?
that's an FY17 budget, the transfer. That came from the personnel expenses and transferred down in the uniforms, but that's an FY17. This is a contractual issues with the, it's in the contract with the unions, the CBA. Down below, you got dues membership. That went up approximately $1,500, I believe. We're a member of Metrolec SWAT team. As you can see what's going on in Franklin today with that tragic event that they're searching for that lost teenager, a young man up there in Franklin. Metrolec Search and Rescue SWAT is up there trying to help him locate, search that wooded area, that swampy area. That's the membership that we're also a member of. So if we had an incident like that, we would call those resources out and they would come down. If we had to fund that ourselves, we'd be talking about thousands and thousands. I'd have to come down to council and ask for an additional funding.
Sure.
So it's a regional team, if you will. It's composed, I believe, of 37 departments, correct? 43 now. So, and actually, the captain is on that SWAT team. He was a SWAT operator. Now he's a general or something. Deputy. So he's a high-ranking official in that SWAT element. So, and there's several components of Metro. They have a motorcycle unit, a bicycle unit, search and rescue, SWAT, computer crime lab, lost children, and I mean it's phenomenal. So they bring the resources to bear if we ever need it in our community. And actually, we did use them not too long ago. I believe it was 2 years. I believe Councilor Blair came out on Jefferson Street and they had that shooting and that barricaded subject in the house.
Yep.
And they actually captured him in the house. So.
Quite impressive.
So that represents that, and that closes out every line.
Councilor Perica?
So when I'm reviewing the budget, I don't, your eye is automatically drawn to increases, but I'm also interested to understand when there's been a reduction as well. So I'm looking at your professional services line. 5301, 101. What is the year-to-date? So what is in your that specific professional services line, and what is your year-to-date, and do you think that'll be enough?
So that is level funded. We didn't ask for any more money in that account. There were council transfers into that account to fix the book-in video camera down in the cell block. That was a council vote, so that's why you're going to see that account higher than the original budget in FY17. So the original requested in FY17 is the same as the original requested FY18. What we use that account for is language line services. So if somebody comes to booking and they don't speak English, We contract with the Language Line, Inc., and they provide us interpretation services. So that's a monthly fee, and also by minute if we actually call the service. So we have them on retainer, and when we call them, we also have numerous forms we have to print, and we use Pleasant Printing for that service. We also, if there's, if we had an incident, I don't know, how would I say this? People that are arrested that put in the cell, and sometimes feces is thrown around. We have a contract with a service to come clean those cells, to disinfect them. Same thing with the cruiser.
I think cell cleaning would have covered that.
So, yeah. Same thing in the back of the cruiser, bloodborne pathogens. We contract with those services too. So if, mostly it's Language Line and in a lot of forms that we have and we use, so.
So the next one down, 530104, it's medical consultation. Again, that's your revised for 217 was 6658, and your requested and recommended is 295180.
So we hired, we had to hire 11 officers to replace those 11 people that left,
So that's where that comes
that
from.
represent, so medical consultation is, when we hire people, we have to send them up to get the medical evaluations from Sturdy, the cardiologists, psychologists, and all these other batteries that test to make sure that we're not hiring a liability that the city has to absorb, and also through the retirement too.
So I kind of lost my track. So when you were saying that Sturdy's rates had gone up, so that was the only reason why I questioned that one, because I was under the impression that that's where that would have come from. And
That count will fluctuate every single year depending on the vacancies we have, but with the cost of per candidate to get the battery a test had gone up per test.
Okay.
And it actually went up after we got the funding from the council. We sent them up there, and the original quote we got from Sturdy wasn't,
changed.
so we saw an increase. So our PO didn't line up with the invoice, and we said, what's the increase represent? And they said, oh, our prices went up. And they said, oh, wonderful, that's great. So,
And then finally, just I was doing a comparison between your tuition and book line, which is 50. Again, I'm looking at I'm not asking you where all your increases are. Like, these are, I'm just concerned that maybe, there's not enough in that account, or if there's something that we need to shift over for that. So that compared to.
is that 532012?
No.
010.
010 is the
Yeah, 010.
tuition of books, but that's the training account.
Okay.
So that's where the
So because
officers,
we're taking on fewer officers, or the projection is taking on fewer officers because we have staff, would reduce that.
no, so basically what you're seeing is when I transfer money into that account, that increases that. So we recognize that, I requested 48,000 last year and 48,000 this year. However, we ran out of money for training, and I transferred money from other accounts in there because the need for training was so great, and this class only came up once in a while. So I felt the need that we needed to send the detectives to that training, to capture that training. Otherwise, we don't know when it's going to come around up into the northeast region. So that's why I transferred money into that account, so if that makes sense.
Great, no, it does, thank you.
Do you still have a question, Councilor
I
Hall?
do. So, Narcan, is that something that has to be paid out of your budget?
So we don't carry Narcan. The fire department has Narcan. Every apparatus and every rescue has it. So speaking to the chief, it would basically be very redundant for the police to carry it, because the response and EMS times by the fire department are exceptional. When they laid out the fire departments around the city, they did a great job geographically. So many times they may beat us to the call, but even if we beat them, it's within seconds that they're there. They have a fabulous response, and the EMS in the city is superior compared to other communities. So, and with us arriving on scene, we haven't lost anyone yet with this protocol that the chief and I have together, consciously saying that the fire department carries the Narcan, we don't need to. And the only people that we've lost, they've been deceased for a while. So they've never been deceased from the call. 911 comes in to the point where they're transported to Sturdy and delivered to Narcan on scene by the fire department. So it's been successful. If we were to carry Narcan, then that's an expense by the city. Not only the Narcan, the training and the medical through Sturdy that we have to have a medical control. So, but the fire department's doing a great job with it, and it's like I agree with the fire chief. It'd be duplicitous for us to carry it through because of the way they. If it was only on the rescues, then I could see that we could change it. But it's amazing how many individuals are carrying Narcan now. So, because this opiate epidemic is simply amazing. I have never seen anything like it.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming down, Chief. One last thing, I just want to compliment you, and I know Council Blair says this all the time, but it's important to note, seems like every other week we're getting a note from the mayor to expend or to accept grants. So to your grant writing team, please keep up the great work. Those funds that you're able to bring in, whether it's the burn grant or similar grants, partnering with other agencies across the state and the country, I think it speaks to the ability of your team to write the appropriate grants at the appropriate time. So thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to say the Captain Poirier and Lieutenant Killo, they're the chief people that operate and run the grants and oversee the grants and capture those grants, so they do a fabulous job. And there's one particular grant that I'm very proud of that we were able to apply for and receive and get the award, was the opiate addiction grant. So
Yes.
we're in the process of contracting with the opiate addiction counselor, or a narcotics recovery coach, if you will, to be embedded with the problem-oriented policing team, the POP team, and to go out and with us to do our home visits. So anybody who overdoses in the city of Attleboro, we do a visit with them. Anybody that becomes aware to us on our radar that might be addicted to opiates or heroin, we will do an interdiction with them, either a home visit or find them and engage with them. It's not a law enforcement visit whatsoever. It's a social visit, and we're not there as cops. We're there because we care, and they're not alone. And we do the same thing with their loved ones, such as a mother or father, because everybody who overdoses, everybody who unfortunately succumbs to an overdose, they have a mother, they have a brother, they have a sister, and they got a brother, right? So there's somebody that cares about that person. So we don't like to use the word junkie.
Sure.
So these people are real, and this problem's growing. So, and it takes a village. So we're in the process of hiring that, or contracting with the services of that recovery coach. So we think it's going to be very successful.
Terrific. Well, thank you, and thank you, the captains, for coming down.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Good night, thanks.
Congratulations to you.
Library on page 53. Hi, Joan. Hi,
Amy has the
Amy.
big job tonight for when.
How are you?
I'll be translating, reading her notes.
Very quiet. Perfect for a librarian.
Does this count bringing your work home with you?
You may not speak any louder than I do. That's it.
So this will be Amy's show tonight.
In a way. That's how when it gets worse. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I do want to say something that you can be extremely proud of your library and the folks that work there. They're doing phenomenal stuff. A lot of the programs we get are free. Our Friends group has raised over $30,000 towards a technology lab and are still going strong. In the fall, they'll be working on raising funds to renovate the children's room. And look at his 3-year project. So there's a lot going on, including you can take ukulele lessons. We have a workshop this summer for all kinds of things. So we have writing classes for preschoolers through grade school, through adults. I can't emphasize enough, especially tonight, how proud I am and how proud you should be. And we will have good news for the big read, but I can't tell you yet.
Oh,
It's my favorite
I know,
night
I'm
at council is when you come and talk to us about the big reads. That's my favorite night.
I do have to say that you did kind of give me a glimpse a few months back about what you're thinking about for the children's room, and man, that looks exciting. I think that'd be outstanding, and I think we're all proud of the library. I mean, I think what you've both done, what your entire staff has done continuously, especially over the years that we've had a little bit of a budget tightening of the belts, I think is really, really remarkable what you've done. So thank you. So what we've been doing a little different this year, as opposed to going through line by line, we've been really opening it up to you to talk about any of the significant changes that you have, anything that you think is important that we should know, and then we'll open it up to questions from the councilors.
Sure. We do have a lot of new staff right now, so our personnel budget didn't go up quite the way it has over the past years. We have a lot more new folks, so we have less vacation time, which is great, but they're not on top steps or anything like that, so it helps. We pretty much submitted a level funded budget where you see some changes, like under I'm going to be multiple voices, sorry. Under equipment maintenance, it shows the revised budget from last year higher, but that's because there was a transfer of funds that you agreed upon of $9,800 that went to a new section of our HVAC system. And I will forewarn you that the company who oversees it is telling me we're going to continually be doing that on an unbelievable basis, and they're going to be sending me some recommendations. Can't predict what it will be or when it will be, but you are going to be spending a lot of money on repairs,
Yeah.
just because it's 27 years old now. And, it's a complicated system, and it's multiple levels and different ways of it being done in the building parts. Some of it's gas, some of it's electrical. So I'll just forewarn you on that. So that, we tried to stay level funded with that, but the mayor's been very good about requesting those transfers. One recently that you did was for repairs on the elevator.
Yep.
So, that works for us as long as that can continue, because I can't predict. So, that has worked, and we appreciate you guys being.
It's hard to plan for the unplanned.
Yes. Another area that changed is by contract. You're required to spend $15,000 a year on courses towards a master's degree. So, again, we haven't gotten that in the budget, but the mayor, once I know, has gotten the request through and you've transferred the funds. What we did this year when I sat down with Barry is I truly think we could spend 10 with the folks that I'm aware of that are going to school or have mentioned they want to start in the spring. But everybody full well knowing that contractually it's 15. So that's a little different this year. What else?
Yeah, sure.
Go right
So I am forever thrilled when we have a communication from the mayor saying that we have to make a transfer for someone who's taken classes. That is a great, I'm happy to see that people are utilizing that where it is a contractual thing. I'm glad to see that you're using it and that your staff is forever, trying to educate themselves even more. I love it. So keep it up.
And just on that note, Joan did request $15,000 to match what the contract calls for. However, we did some analysis over the 2-year average is about $8,800 and the 3-year average is about $6,800. So we both thought that $10,000 would be sufficient. But even if it isn't, as you mentioned, the mayor would just send down a request to bridge the difference.
Sure.
That makes perfect sense, and that's a great way to look at your budget and say, okay, so this is what I know is coming, and this is what our yearly average is. That's exactly what we're asking you to do, so good job, everyone. Thank you.
Council Hall.
Yes, and I know you and I, Joan, have talked for years and years about the library, and it's interesting because the outside, the structure is troublesome. I'll say that word, okay? But it's such an icon in the city, and people always go through the conflict of, do we put money into that? Do we not put money into it? Do we need a big building like that? But I think it's more important to understand what goes on inside of that building. And I've used that building myself for several things. It is a community meeting place, and people, I don't think, fully see that happening. The rooms can be signed out. There's several rooms, you know, and I know that you host nonprofit organizations. I know I've had the benefit of that. So it really is a place that I'm not sure if you could find that kind of thing, you know, anywhere else. Plus, like you said, you've upgraded. You've done an excellent, excellent job of modernizing what we consider the old idea of library. So it's not just books anymore in the inside. There's history inside there and everything. So I just want people to really realize, please go to the library. If you haven't been in the library, it's not your grandmother's library, okay, anymore. And I think that you really need to understand the importance of what that building, institution does for people here in Attleboro. It's a meeting place too for a lot of people. So, you know, I can't say enough about it. So please just don't look at the amount of money that gets spent on having to repair things, because you've done an excellent job of transitioning that.
The other thing, and I think you all received that pamphlet we're working on as to how we work with other educational institutions, and Joe Usain's here from BCC for us. We're talking with Lori Regan a lot, and Donna Goldstein is on the big read. We're working on some other projects. We work with the schools very closely. And, you know, our vision for the library is that, well, we use 4 words. I'm going to draw a blank, right? Imagination, inspiration, information, and innovation. And those are the 4 things we're working on. And we're trying to work more and more on the fact that people to feel what they read. It's not words on the page. You have to comprehend it, and you have to think about it. You have to see yourself in those situations to fully understand. And that's how we're working with the schools, you know, hand in hand. The technology lab is because of the kind of skills. Our involvement with the whole STEAM movement is showing the kind of jobs that are going to be out there. So we look at what we do to coincide with what has to happen to create a future for this community. And I'll tell you, we don't have enough meeting space. I mean, it seems like a large building. And we have meetings on the 2nd floor, the 4th floor, the 1st floor, the 3rd floor, around the table.
In the middle of the library if you need to.
Really, there are some nights. I mean, the woman who volunteers the yoga class wanted to do a 2nd one in the spring, and we had to wait till the fall because I didn't have 6 weeks in a row that she could have a Monday night. So, I mean, it's a busy place. Parking is a problem, but it's a busy place.
Well, you do a great job of really accommodating. You talk about the partnerships. We heard a lot of this last night. I think that's what sets the city aside from a lot, is the synergies amongst departments and different groups across the city. And to have a library, as Council Hall was saying, that we have. And I think that what needs to be recognized is the job that you've done prioritizing those capital improvements to preserve the beauty of that is really one of the cornerstones and the crown jewels of the city. So I think that really needs to be recognized, and you know, I know we all appreciate that.
I don't know, do you have any other questions? Because it's pretty much the same.
I have one question. So,
Sure.
did we just get a notification that you're hiring a janitorial staff there?
We're going to be hiring a new janitor.
A new janitor, and the other one is
He's gone.
he's retired or
Yeah.
leaving.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just looking at the purchase of services. Do you know do we have any expectation, Barry, that we might need to bring in someone to do that for some services, and then before there's a
Joan
hiring?
has somebody.
You have
You
someone?
mean in between?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
The guy who was before me, he has an awesome person who's doing a few hours for us
Oh, great.
every day.
Okay.
After he leaves.
It gets to the synergy that Jay was just talking
Yes.
about.
Well, exactly. But
I saw him
in the
today.
event that
Yeah.
Cleaning windows, right?
No.
somebody else.
No. The other thing we do, we have naps right now doing a deep cleaning, which we do once a year. And we're going to look at that, whether we might need to do it more than once. But yeah, that's who you saw.
Well, if there's nothing else, thank you.
Tony, thing I'll say is Amy's really in charge of the social media we do, and she really does an awesome job, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's just the way of the world now, so great job, keep it up. You know,
It's great to be part of the community. It goes both ways.
you bring a lot to the community, so thank you, and keep up the great work.
So we're gonna see you all, right?
Always.
You believe it?
Peter plays the ukulele.
I would, you know what, I would charge an
You play the
admission
ukulele.
fee if Barry's the one taking the lessons, because I'll pay for that.
That would be my first Facebook Live.
allowed to.
Oh, that would be excellent.
Spinning out of control.
Joan, feel better?
That's what happens when you have 4 meetings in a
Amy,
row.
thanks for coming
It
down.
just gets a little slappy.
All right, next we have assessor on page 11.
Could you say that one more time, Mr. Boston?
Here we go. We have the assessor.
The assessor.
The assessor.
Page 11.
Page 11, kid.
Yeah, kid.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's all right.
It's the peanut butter and jelly. It's kicking in.
Peanut butter jelly time. I know. Mr.
Good
Moskowitz,
evening,
Nice to
counselors.
see you. How are you?
Same here.
So thanks for coming down. We're doing this a little different than we've done it in years past. As opposed to having you go line by line, we're just going to have you talk really an overview of your budget, what any changes, any requests, anything you think is important for us to know, and then we'll pepper you with questions.
So I should go home, right?
Probably go home.
It's been the same for the last 3 years. There's nothing to really say has changed. As you know, I have a whole new staff.
Yeah.
Budget has been actually down in the last 3 years from where it used to be because of salaries and so forth. So,
Yeah.
you know, business is normal. It's a good building year. It should be a good year. That's it.
That's it.
There's no arguments tonight.
There's nothing. I was
You're like,
prepared
I
for a good
I
time.
have
I was
popcorn on
really
my shelf.
prepared.
No, this is nice.
And I'm actually disappointed. I was looking forward to tonight.
We got about 8 minutes to kill, so if anyone, no, just kidding. Yeah, I mean, looking at this, honestly, Stan, you've done a nice job, really, when we talk about a level funded budget. I mean, line item to line item, very minimal change. I think we're seeing this trend of lower salaries, given the new staff. So, new staff's working out well.
Yeah, very well. Very well. It looks good. And, you know, as I said, you'll probably, the assistant will someday probably be the assessor. My time, pretty much getting close to retirement. You know, got to do it. And one thing I will mention in the budget, though, that normally we have under here on the reval. Remember, everything has changed to a 5-year reval. Our next reval is 5 years out. So I was contemplating a 3-year maintenance agreement. Normally, we have 2 years of maintenance, 1 year for the certification. Now it's a 5-year. I have not put it out because I'm hesitant, because there's a lot of changes taking place, so I don't know if I'm going to put out a 2-year maintenance agreement or a 3-year maintenance agreement. So that's why you see nothing down here. But in the June timeframe, more than likely in the June timeframe, you'll be seeing from the mayor, something coming down for what was that? What would that be from, Barry?
Part of the reserve fund
Reserve.
transfer. So what Stanley's talking about is something that we normally don't include in the operating budget. Maybe in June or July, we asked the council for an appropriation from the reserve fund for transfer to fund the reval.
Right.
And then you'll see it in the operating budget as a capital item.
So that's and the only other things I can make you aware of next year are Vision, who is our software thing, is they've come up with a different program. So that line item will increase next year because there's things that they're going to start doing in the cloud to back up and so forth. So that, I suspect, I'm not putting it in this year because I don't have it in the budget. They just sent me down a thing, so just nothing major. You know, nothing to write home about.
Thank you.
I guess. All right.
Hi, good to see you. Here's your hat.
I
What's your
think we're all
hurry?
in shock.
Thanks, Dan.
All right.
Thank you.
thanks, Stan.
It was a pleasure, and stay out of trouble and have a fun year campaigning.
Oh, yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Has to end on
That's gonna be my.
controversy. Has to end.
What's that? Yeah.
The next budget's very complicated as well, so this is gonna take a while.
Gonna take a while, huh? All right, our city planner, Gary Reagan.
$50 in supply line.
I know. 23, page 23. How are you?
Hi, Jay. How are you?
Good.
Hi, everybody.
So, again, the way we're doing this is a little different than in years past. If you already heard the spiel, feel free to stop me. We're not going line item by line item, just anything that you think we should be aware of, any changes, reductions, increases, anything like that. And then we'll open it up and pepper you with questions.
Well, other than my salary, which is about 9/10 of my entire budget, everything is level funded. I have a $50 office supply, and that's it. So I don't know what else to tell you.
That's a disgrace, sir.
Yeah, I'm
$50.
sorry. I mean,
You
You
still raiding
added-
our office?
pardon me?
You still raiding our office?
Yeah, but yeah, wait till like middle of June comes, sure. We're all ravaging off each other.
$50 for staff development?
Well-
Come on.
No, it's not. That's
No, I
just,
just want to point out there's a slight error in Gary's budget. The $50 for staff development should be the $50
yeah,
for
office
supplies.
supplies.
So, that's it.
I was going to ask that question, though. I mean, I know that there's a lot of classes, because, you know, I participate in some of those CPT classes. I mean, could you use a staff development budget?
Yeah, I pay my own. Whenever I take a class, I just pay for it myself.
I did too, but I mean, how
Yeah.
about the folks in your office?
There's always room for improvement. There's always room to learn something new. Sure there is, but we understand the dilemma the city's in, and I don't want to, pardon me?
Yeah, but we want people to be the most trained that they can possibly be, and I know that there's always changes, you know, that goes on. I would just consider maybe,
I've had those discussions with Mayor Dumas, and he's aware of our needs, and you know, if something happens, then sure, why not? It was push our staff, you know, to excel and try to be as far ahead of the curve as we can. But, you know, as of right now, I understand the dilemma. Like I said, I pay for it myself, no big deal. So, yeah, thank you. If it happens, it happens, and sure, we could
if
certainly use
somebody
it.
does want to go to one and you have something, would you come back and ask us for some money?
Well, I typically go through the mayor's office, yeah. All right. Salaries, it's just whatever the natural increase is with the step. I think it's a 1% increase over last year's. I kept the overtime account flat. That is only for the planning administrator. It is only for the night meetings, so I don't want the council to think that just whimsically I just have someone work overtime just because I want to push something. That is strictly for night meetings, just for the planning administrator, the senior planner, nor I get
Imagine if we
OT.
had to pay Gary for his overtime.
Oh, wow.
And the only other thing we have is longevity for 2 staff members. That's it right now. So I've only got 2 staff at or above 10 years right now. And that's it. There's nothing else really. So it's about as bare bone dry as you could possibly get. So
Looks like I lucked out in running this meeting. All right, any questions for the city planner?
No.
No.
Anything you want to tell us?
no, knock on wood, I think everything's going really well right now. So we're in good shape. I think we're ahead of the curve. Got some really interesting projects getting unveiled in FY 2018. Looking forward to working on those, all grant funded. So
And that's another important point. We talked about the police and the amazing job they do getting grants. I mean, you and your team in terms of securing grants for some of these projects and the partnerships you have with state and federal agencies is really, it's outstanding. And a lot of what we do across the city wouldn't happen without those grants. So please keep up the good work and please bring in other people's money. So that's a
yeah,
beautiful thing.
well, as you know, when we come down, we tell you we got a $4 million grant or $1 million grant. There's no cash matches. I think we got one for a quarter that we're gonna, I think some small amount of a cash match, but no, we're talking big $1 million amounts that
Right.
we're getting those without a cash match. So, yeah, we've been, I'm not gonna say lucky. I think we're good at what we do, so I don't think it's luck. It's aptitude and capability, so.
Absolutely. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, folks. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so now we can move on to our friend Lance Hill with Public Works. So you brought your bodyguard, Ryan. How are you, kid? Page 43, or 43?
40.
It's body.
43, kid.
43.
Makes me so happy to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So, Lance, we're doing it a little different this year. Instead of going line item by line item, we're just giving you an opportunity to talk about any changes in your budget, whether increase, decrease, any thing you think we should be aware of, and, you know, just a general discussion around what's going on.
Okay, great. For our department, we level funded just about every line item that we have, with the exception of 3 that have to do with the new building that we, just brought online. This will be our first full budget year with the new building. So we have an increase you'll see in some of the building maintenance lines, and the service contracts that we are looking to, the preventative maintenance service contracts that we're looking to have for the new building, including generator maintenance, those type of things, kind of keeping everything up to date and preventative, maintained. With the exception of that, everything else that we have was level funded. We level funded the same number of staff this year going as we did last. Since we made the submission to the council, we have had some folks leave, and we've backfilled, and we are rehiring those. So it's slightly different, I think, but it's in our favor, the way we budgeted the positions. Outside of that, I think everything is the same as it was last year.
Any questions, concerns? Council Hall?
Yes, talk to us about I'm not gonna get the name right, but it has to do with the reparation of the streets. That there's
Secret
a
fix?
huge, cost, expense that goes along with that, but a necessary cost expense. So please talk to us about that.
Are you talking about the memo that I sent down a couple weeks ago? Yeah. So we recently created our pavement management program is what we call it, where we have a vendor that was hired to evaluate every street in the entire city. They provided an outside third-party view of all of those streets, kind of gave us a rating, so we were able to compile a list of kind of repairs that are in the worst need, in the worst shape. As we apply that to looking at the sheer number of roads that we have and the dollars that would be required to repair those, it's pretty substantial. A couple of good things that came out of that report, it showed that our roads, on average, citywide, were in satisfactory condition, but barely, and dropping with the amount of funding that we get. Our funding from the state has remained exactly the same for the last 5 years, hasn't changed a penny. But new roads are coming online, and materials are getting more expensive. And honestly, we have a lot more demand than we have available funds to make those corrections. As part of that memo, I think probably the most striking thing that came out that said that we're underfunded with our roads currently. So if we continue along this path that we're currently funding, that valuation on our roads is going to continue to decline, and we're going to be in the fair category within a couple of years and dropping further from there. To maintain our existing level of service, if you will, we would have to not only double or triple the amount of spending that we're doing, but close to quadruple. We put about $800,000 annually into the roads. That suggests just an order of magnitude for planning purposes that we would need to be spending about $3.2 million just to maintain the existing level of service of the roads.
So what's the plan?
It's something we're working on with the administration. Obviously, that's a big ask, to go from where we are now, which is we don't spend a lot of general fund dollars on roadway repairs. We rely primarily on the state. So we've got a ways to go, to be quite honest.
So we have to start upping our contribution to that for the city's infrastructure, if you would.
To maintain the current state of the roads, yes. If we want to improve them, even more so.
If I may. And has our Chapter 90 funding changed over the course? Has it been pretty much the same for the last 5 years?
Yeah, for the last 5 years, it's been exactly the same. It hasn't changed at all. It hasn't gone up, hasn't gone
It's
down.
really a decrease, because
That's the point.
prices
Right.
go up.
That's right. If you look at it and on a
And
cost of
our-
living adjustment, right.
And we've added roads in the city of Attleboro too, so it's even more so.
Yeah, 2 points, and I'll get to you in 1 second. 2 points I want to make is, one, we've talked a lot throughout this process about a level-funded budget. It sounds great. A level-funded budget sounds great, but a level-funded budget is really a budget decrease. It just because costs of goods and services continue to go up, and we're seeing what happens here. I mean, if we need to go from 800,000 to 3.2 million, and a lot of this is, and I'm gonna, even though President Cook isn't here, but we're dealing with a lot of unfunded state mandates, which are telling us what we need to do, and, coming up with the money, and I know Attleboro is not alone in this, so, I don't envy you in this situation, sir, but I know we have the right man at the helm. And what is the mileage in terms of the roads? Is it 23 miles of road?
No, we have 180 miles of road that we maintain in the
Okay.
city. There's 23 miles of state roadway that is state owned and maintained. But what we are responsible for, my 10 guys on the road are responsible for 180 miles.
Well, Councilor Blair.
We say about new roads coming on. We got to get those on as quick as possible too, because that fits into the formula for our
To increase, yeah.
Chapter 90 money. There was a time when we had a ton of them come through. And I think they're staying pretty much up with that, aren't they, at this point?
Honestly, there was a period of time where I think developers kind of were struggling a little bit. So they would bring their developments up to a certain standpoint, and then they weren't
We're finishing.
finishing them, at least not to a satisfactory level that the council would accept. So there are some roads out there that are still in need of being brought on that kind of fall in that gray area. We have residents living on those roads,
This,
so we maintain them to some degree anyway.
this is sort of a pet peeve with me. The contractors put up a bond, correct, to put in these subdivisions,
That's correct.
and then they don't finish them. I personally think we should be more proactive in grabbing that bond and finishing them ourselves rather than let them linger for years.
I can't say I necessarily disagree with you on that.
No, it's just, we've had a couple cases where they've walked.
There's several cases. It puts us in a tough predicament. Do I plow those roads? I have people living on them.
Yeah.
Do I not plow them? There's no contractor around to do it, so from a public safety standpoint,
The people
it's tough.
that own those houses on those roads deserve the same services because they still pay taxes.
Absolutely, they're paying the taxes, right?
I think we should be more active on calling those bonds, finishing the roads. It's, I don't want to say shady contractors, but we have a few that have been in and out of this city that just don't. We're lucky to have some great ones.
Well, I think that's, excuse me, I'm sorry. I think that sounds like a process issue that we can control, and perhaps there needs to be some, because on the planning board and being on the planning board, I know that that's where that takes place. So maybe a conversation with the planning department as to, when somebody actually does get to sign off and say that the money, that they're good.
We shouldn't, excuse me, but it is a conversation. We shouldn't be letting these bonds sit there and roads unfinished and people living on these streets with a road not up to par that the contractors agreed to do. And
Well, especially
pull the
if,
bonds,
yeah.
get it done.
I think this is a good conversation to have, probably for a different night.
Very good.
I do think that it's an important subject, especially as we're talking about if Chapter 90 is level funded, then, we need to take a look at this.
I have a question about
Council Hall?
your assessment that you did. Since we had an outside agency come in and talked about the nature of our roads, as a lot of cities and towns did with their bridges and so forth, can that information at some point in time be utilized with the state to show cause for us to be considered higher for some of the Chapter 40 money.
So, yeah, the Chapter 90 money, the way,
90.
yeah, the way that works, it works on the number of roadway miles you have, and then they apply a factor to it for, I believe it's what they call environmental justice, you know, the level of your, the economic status of your community. The lower it is, the higher it might be, but they apply a specific formula to that. So the more number of roads that we have, the more money that we would be receiving from the state. But that pot of money is one pot of money that they distribute between all of the municipalities in the Commonwealth.
So this may come down to a similar situation, if I might suggest that what we had with the schools when we don't get enough Chapter 40 money is that, you know, the city has to, excuse me?
It's chapter 70.
Why do I have 40? What is
I don't know.
Chapter 40?
Because we were saying 40 earlier.
We're all following you. We know what you're
But you know what
I
I'm
know what
talking
you're
about?
saying.
Glad, like somebody does, but thank you. See, it takes a village. So it sounds as though that they're, I mean, this is a place where the city's gonna have to start looking at putting some of its own funds, you know, and not rely on the state. I mean, I know the city does, but more. Not rely on the state, because it doesn't look like the state's gonna send us that kind of money anymore. So I'm just kind of saying it's something we're definitely gonna be looking at in your budget, okay? I mean, I think there's an expectation that we're gonna see some additional funds come down from you, I hope. Not because we want, but because I
Sure.
hope, because I think we need to do it, so. That's my 2 cents.
Councilor Preca, did you have a question?
40, 30, 70.
So yeah, there are other, we did receive communications from you through the mayor about some things that are coming in the future, in addition to the roads. Perhaps you could have a little discussion about that, and then we can talk a little snow and ice after that.
Sure.
All right.
So the federal government, it's not the state government, the federal government's implementing what they call Phase 2 of their national pollution discharge elimination. What they're looking to do is clean the runoff that goes downstream. They're implementing their Phase 2 of that, which is a lot more stringent on communities than in the past. That permit is actually underway now. It begins July 1st. We as a city have to make our application, I want to say by the end of September, and that kind of kicks us into how we're going to start addressing some of these. Unfortunately, you know, it's something that's brought on by the federal government through the EPA. We've met with DEP and we've had internal meetings with the administration about what it truly means for my department specifically and citywide as a whole. It really is a lot more involved in maintaining and cleaning some of the runoff that is making its way downstream. And some significant dollars are in store. For our community, it's a little hard to guess yet because we're so new to the process, but it does look like it's going to be upwards of $500,000 annually.
Does that include equipment?
It probably would include equipment.
Would you have to add staff to manage that specifically?
In order to meet all of the requirements that they have, I would say most assuredly would have to add staff to meet that.
Frightening.
Yeah, you can have
Frightening.
one big department.
It's a toss up between that or continuing with, you know, toxic runoff, like what, you know,
Yeah.
they're-
So we're not gonna have a choice in this one.
It is an unfunded mandate that's passed out, not this time by the state, but by the federal government.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have no choice but to either comply or face the fines and you know, the penalties that come along with it.
Which my understanding of the program is the fines are gonna be more than the $500,000 annual that would be anyway.
They could be, you know, I mean, you know, it's a threat, it's a fine from the
course.
federal government, so, you know, it's a corrective action plan that we would have to put together.
Well, maybe as the money comes down through the feds or maybe the state will throw some money
Maybe
in.
that'll be chapter 40.
And that'll be chapter 40, 40 and a half.
there is a chapter 40.
In fact, it's such an unfunded, this particular is such an unfunded mandate that we went to a program on what was coming down the line, Tara, the conservation agent, and I were both there. And I raised my hand in the group of people and I said, is there any possible funding? And both EPA and DEP said, no.
No.
No grants, no funding, no anything.
Is it going to be phased in, or is it going to be, here's the start date, here we go?
So there is a start date, but the costs that we would have to incur would phase in over time.
Okay.
I'm curious if things would change with the current administration. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, too. I was thinking the same,
Like,
especially
he
with
doesn't
that.
really care about the
Right, there
current
seems to be a focus.
Loosen.
All right, so,
And so snow and ice, just,
Snow and
I know,
ice.
I'm sorry.
No,
I know,
that's what I
but, so, your snow and ice is, like, the same, completely. As you have been through the snow and ice program, is this your second time around this year?
This was my second year here with the city, yes.
Is there anything in here that you would see that, you would need an increase or decrease, you've already evaluated a decrease, but.
It's been at, I think, 97,500, I think that's the total budget.
We deficit spend.
That's right.
that was my next
So
question.
it's been funded at that level since at least
The good news is under the new
2007.
Modernization Act, you don't have to vote on deficit spending any longer.
Sweet. It's always good to remind the public about the deficit spending, because when they look at this and, or when they hear us talking about the $97,000 budget for snow and ice, and then you fast forward and we're talking about $600,000, $700,000, $900,000, they're like, what? So it's just good to have that kind of reminder
You were just
conversation.
predicting a good year for us.
I am, yes. We're hoping to not,
That's like one storm.
we're hoping it's just rain this year.
You what?
We're hoping it's just rain this year,
Rain, that's
this
Well, I
winter.
find it, I love to talk about snow and ice on 100-degree days.
I know.
I don't like to talk about it at any time.
Before we adjourn, I just want to thank you and your team for the job that you've done. I know that there's been several resident issues that I've called you, seems almost weekly lately. You're very responsive. There's one that we're working on when I called Lance, said, hey, here's the situation. About 10, 15 minutes later, I got a picture on my phone of the situation where I could see Lance in the shadow. So, I mean, that kind of hands-on leadership goes a long way.
Hopefully it wasn't a very big shadow.
Wasn't a big shadow at all.
That's a very big shadow.
I really was.
But I appreciate that person, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Lance's office has always been open to me. We have a good relationship, I think, and an open door. I know I barge in once in a while and say hello, and it's great the cooperation we've had.
Is that why we have to set appointments now? Well, thank you. And
you.
if there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:17.
Second.
Second, and we, all in favor? Aye, and we are adjourned at 7:17.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.